Tonight's episode opened 9 case files from small towns that lived off highways and sleep, the kinds of places with one diner light still on at midnight and a radio tower that carried voices farther than it should have. Each file was partially verified. Each had a witness, an artifact, and at least one external check that failed to explain what happened. If you had ever driven a road where the map hesitated, where the signal returned in the wrong order, keep listening. And if you wanted more archived cases like these, follow Black Pine Archives now, because the pattern did not end with the first driver who noticed it. Evan Mercer ran night freight because the roads stayed open and the docks stayed fast. He hauled boxed goods for a mid-size carrier. Nothing hazmat, nothing dramatic. Just sealed pallets that moved between small towns and regional distribution yards on schedules that punished delays. On the first Monday of November, he left a regional hub after dark with a narrow delivery window and a route that had recently stopped behaving like a route. Construction had pushed traffic off the interstate and onto a state highway that cut through mill towns, low valleys, and long unlit stretches where the radio faded the moment the hills rose. Evan had driven the corridor enough to know the dead zones by instinct, the spots where the phone signal dipped and the CB turned into thin hiss. He treated his cab like a workstation. The bill of lading stayed in a folder clipped behind the sun visor. The dispatch printout stayed on a clipboard between the seats. His spare pens stayed in the same pocket. His gloves stayed in the door tray. When something went wrong on the road, the first defense was always procedure, because procedure reduced panic into steps. Before pulling out, he did his walk around like a ritual. He checked the trailer seal number against the paperwork. He photographed the seal with his phone and logged it in his notes. He checked his marker lights. He listened to the airlines settle. He watched the ELD confirm movement and timing. Nothing in those routines suggested the night would become a case file. Evan kept his CB on low volume for situational awareness. He monitored out of habit, not conversation. He did not transmit. He had learned that talking invited trouble and that silence kept him focused. A little after midnight, as the highway narrowed and the shoulders darkened into trees, his speaker opened with a carrier tone that sounded too clean. The tone held a fraction longer than normal, as if someone keyed up deliberately and waited for silence to become complete. Then a voice read his unit number with the calm confidence of a dispatcher, followed by his trailer number, followed by the commodity line that existed only on the paperwork in his folder. My truck number got called while I stayed silent. From the driver's dash recorder, Evan checked his microphone first. The push-to-talk button moved cleanly and returned cleanly. The transmit indicator remained dark. He checked his channel selector. He turned the squelch knob and listened for the normal clutter of late-night chatter. The voice persisted as if none of that mattered. He told himself it was a prank because prank was the only category that fit at first glance. Truckers tested each other. Drivers mimicked dispatch voices. People lied for entertainment. Evan could accept all of that. What he could not accept was accuracy. The voice listed information in sequence, the way a system verified a record. It described the load using internal shorthand his company used for warehouse sorting, including an abbreviation that appeared only on the printed bill of lading. It referenced a stop code from his route sheet, then referenced the next stop code in line, as if reading the plan the way Evan read it. It said the commodity line exactly as it was printed, including the abbreviation. From the driver's written statement, Evan did not respond on the radio. He did not give his name. He did not give confirmation. He drove and listened, waiting for the punchline that would prove it was human. Instead, the voice shifted from paperwork to environment. It began naming mile markers before his headlights reached them, as if the signs were being read from a place ahead of his truck. The tone stayed steady, professional, and oddly patient. It called the mile marker before I saw it, like it was already there. From the driver's voice memo, Evan glanced down at his navigation app. The map jittered and then stalled. It did not go fully blank, but the blue dot advanced in small jumps, as if the road had been edited a segment at a time. His dedicated GPS unit in the dash held longer, then hesitated, then recalculated with no visible change in his lane position. He checked his dash clock, out of habit. The minute repeated. The time display showed the same minute twice in a row, then corrected itself. The ELD kept logging miles like nothing had happened, as if one system agreed with the world and the other disagreed politely. Dash time repeated 1 minute while the log kept counting forward. From the ELD export notes, a mismatch like that could happen under stress, under fatigue, under a glitch. Evan tried to remove the variables. He took a sip of coffee and forced himself to breathe evenly. He straightened his posture, rolled his shoulders once, and kept his eyes on the lane. Then the voice began describing the inside of his cab. It named the folder on his visor. It named the torn coffee sleeve on the passenger seat and described the tear as a detail, not a guess. It named a folded receipt Evan had shoved under his insurance card months earlier and forgotten. It referenced the spare set of straps behind the passenger seat and the specific brand of flashlight clipped into the cup holder. There is a receipt under the card, folded twice. From the driver's voice memo, Evan opened the glove box with one hand, keeping the other on the wheel, and found the folded receipt exactly where the voice had placed it in his mind. That detail did not feel like a prank anymore. It felt like proximity, like someone was inside the cab without taking up space. He did not stop. He did not pull over to think. He did what experienced drivers did when a situation stopped fitting their models of reality. He moved toward bright, public places. The next small-town exit had a well-lit truck stop and an open diner. Evan passed it on purpose because the voice began describing that exit before the reflective sign appeared in his beam, and because the voice framed it as a recommendation dressed up as certainty. It described the exit before my headlights reached the marker. From the driver's dash recorder, Evan changed lanes twice. He slowed briefly. He accelerated. He watched to see if the voice would lag, stutter, or lose him the way humans did when they guessed. The voice stayed aligned with him, as if it was not following at all, as if it was simply reading from the same line of reality he drove through. By the time he reached the next fueling station that had cameras, lights, and visible people moving between pumps, Evan's hands hurt from gripping the wheel. He parked under a floodlight and killed the engine. He left the cab sealed for a moment, listening to the cooling tick of metal and the distant rumble of other trucks. He turned the CB off. The silence lasted long enough to count 3 breaths. Then his phone opened an app he had not touched. His voice memo application launched by itself and began playing a recording Evan did not remember making. The recording contained his own voice, low and tired, speaking his truck number and listing his route stops in order. The cadence was his. The breath pattern was his. The microphone sound matched his cabin acoustics. The file timestamp placed the recording 1 minute ahead of the moment he noticed it. That was my voice, but I never recorded it. From the driver's follow-up audio, Evan replayed it once, then stopped, because hearing himself speak words he had not spoken felt like stepping onto a floor that could not hold weight. He went inside and asked for help in the only language that did not sound like a ghost story. He requested a radio check and a shop inspection. He mentioned interference. He mentioned a possible equipment fault. He avoided words like impossible. He completed the run because freight did not stop for fear and because his load still had to meet a receiving appointment. But he did it with a new rule: no side roads, no quiet exits, no stops that were not crowded. He drove with his phone recording audio in short bursts, documenting the moments his clocks disagreed and the moments the radio opened on its own. I recorded because I needed proof I was not imagining it. From the driver's written statement on the final approach to the distribution yard, the voice returned once more, softer than before. Evan did not turn the CB back on. He did not key up. He heard it anyway through the speaker, as if the power switch had become a suggestion rather than a control. The voice did not threaten him. It did not demand. It verified. It recited his unit number again, then recited his load again, as if confirming he arrived with what the paperwork said he carried. The tone matched a service desk more than a predator. Evan delivered, docked, and walked his paperwork into the office, with his jaw tight and his eyes refusing to drift toward the yard's darker corners. He asked his supervisor for a different route. He asked for a different shift. He told himself he could outrun a corridor the way you outran weather. The next morning, a shop technician inspected Evan's CB unit. The diagnostic showed no recent transmit events during the window when the broadcasts allegedly occurred. The push-to-talk switch showed no sticking. The mic cable tested clean. The unit behaved like a normal radio because it was a normal radio, at least in the ways that mattered to tools. Unit showed no transmit activity during alleged broadcast window. From the shop diagnostic report, carrier telematics added a second layer of discomfort. Evan's truck showed a 1-minute location gap in the corridor where the voice first opened. The gap appeared as a clean missing segment between normal pings, as if the system had simply failed to anchor his coordinates for that minute and then resumed like nothing happened. 1-minute location gap appeared with no other system faults. From the carrier telematics summary, Evan kept the printed bill of lading sealed in a plastic sleeve after that. He treated it like an artifact, something that should not be handled casually. The ink on the commodity line looked slightly smeared by the end of the week, as if humidity had reached it too aggressively. He could not prove that mattered, but he could not stop noticing it. He quit the route within a month. He took day runs. He accepted worse traffic because traffic meant witnesses. He stopped using the CB except in emergencies, and when he did, he kept the microphone in a bag, as if separating it from open air could separate him from being heard. Evan later said the worst part was not that something knew the paperwork. The worst part was that it recited his information like an access credential, the way a system accepted a login and decided whether a vehicle belonged on its road. It sounded like verification, not conversation. From the driver's follow-up statement, archival transition, a voice verified a manifest without being given it. The next file involved a way station that enforced compliance without identity and removed a driver from the normal highway for 1 missing minute. Dylan Ross had hauled long enough to treat way stations like weather. You did not argue with them. You adjusted, complied, and moved on. That was how you kept your record clean and your clock predictable. He knew where the permanent scales sat, which hours they usually stayed open, and where temporary enforcement liked to set up portable pads on wide shoulders and rest areas. He also knew the unwritten rule most drivers followed without saying it out loud. If it had the state's markings, you stopped. If it did not, you kept both hands on the wheel and hoped your paperwork did not get tested that day. On a damp night in late spring, Dylan rolled east on a 4-lane highway that cut between fields and low stands of trees. The rain came in steady curtains that smeared light into streaks. He had just cleared a permanent scale that was closed. Signs flipped to indicate bypass when he saw the faint rhythm of amber ahead. From a distance, the setup looked familiar. Cones tapered from the left lane into the right. A portable message board glowed ahead. To a tired driver in wet weather, the pattern read as one thing only: enforcement. It looked normal from far away, like any temporary operation. From the driver's insurance statement, Dylan eased into the right lane before his brain finished registering the details. Years of habits did most of the work. You did not want to be the one rig blowing past a surprise inspection. You got off the throttle early, lined up straight, and watched for hand signals. As he drew closer, the familiarity thinned. There were no patrol cars parked in the median, no cruiser silhouettes, no reflective stripes catching his headlights. The cones were there, but the tape on them swallowed his beams instead of throwing them back. The portable board showed wording, but something was wrong with it. The message read in plain block letters on a blank background. No agency initials, no seal, no state name along the bottom, just command, pull right, slow, prepare to stop. Board displayed instructions with no department name or logo. From the dash camera transcript, Dylan told himself he was seeing things wrong through the rain. He rolled over a patch of asphalt that looked darker than the rest, like it had been poured recently and had not fully blended with the older surface. The lane narrowed as the cones pulled him inward, and his mirrors began to show less and less of the open highway behind. He stopped where a painted line suggested he should. His tach ticked down into idle. In a normal operation, this was when a trooper or inspector stepped out of a scale house or from behind a truck. They approached the driver's window with a clipboard and a flashlight, and life followed a script. No one came. The cab felt too quiet. Rain pattered against the windshield, but the usual background sounds seemed muffled. His phone, which had shown 1 week bar for most of the night, dropped to no service. His CB carried only thin hiss. His dash clock rolled over to a new minute, then rolled back to the one before, then advanced again as if it had stuttered. My dash time repeated 1 minute while my log kept going forward. From the driver's compliance note, Dylan watched the side mirrors. The highway behind should have been visible as open lanes and distant taillights. Instead, the view filled with the taper, the cones, and darkness beyond. He could not see past the edge of the operation. It was like the world had ended at the last cone and refused to show him anything beyond. He waited another minute, counted out in his head. No one walked up. No flashing flashlight. No gesture to pull forward to a scale pad that did not exist. A driver who had not seen as much might have leaned on the horn or climbed down to look. Dylan did neither. Experience taught him that when something involving enforcement felt wrong, you made yourself small and you did not volunteer more exposure than necessary. He eased off the brake and let the truck roll. That was when the gate dropped. Behind his trailer, a plain metal arm descended from a post that he did not remember seeing on the way in. No reflective stripes, no sign plates attached, no recognizable branding. It settled across the lane in one smooth motion and stopped just low enough that he would have bent it if he tried to force his way out. Gate arm lowered behind the trailer, with no warning or lights. From the driver's written statement ahead, where he expected to roll forward into a wider area, a new sign stood where there had been clear view a moment before. It announced that the roadway beyond was closed for repairs. No detour markers, no arrow boards, no debris, just blockade. Dylan set his brakes and climbed down into air that smelled like wet asphalt and something metallic underneath. The surface beneath his boots felt warmer than the chill air justified, as if heat bled up from below the pavement instead of from sun that had been gone for hours. He walked along the lane, scanning for the familiar hardware of a temporary scale. Metal plates, sensor cables, generator boxes. He saw none. The asphalt was uninterrupted except for one precision-cut seam that ran across the lane like a boundary. It did not look like a crack. It looked like a machine cut it in a single pass. There were no pads, no cables, no equipment, only a clean seam across the lane. From the trooper field notes, he checked the gravel margin. In a real setup, you saw footprints from multiple boots, tire tracks from patrol vehicles, the mess of human presence. Here, he saw only his own prints and the distinctive twin tracks of his drive tires. No approach tracks, No turnaround marks. No debris. There were no footprints anywhere except mine. From the Trooperfield notes, he turned toward the gate and considered backing under it. As he lined himself up mentally for the maneuver, he noticed another wrongness. From where he stood, the taper of cones behind him no longer opened cleanly back onto visible highway. Instead, the lane curved away behind a shallow bend that had not existed on approach. His entry point had vanished behind geometry that felt newly inserted. Dylan climbed back into the cab and tried the CB. The display lit up, but the channel indicator strip showed blank, as if the radio had lost track of the band. He keyed the mic anyway and requested a radio check. The carrier tone went out, and no one replied. He picked up his phone and called dispatch, on the assumption that at least the voice on the other end would be human. The call connected. The line stayed open. The person who answered spoke in a tone that sounded like his dispatcher, but the cadence was wrong. There were no questions, no pauses, no human handoff. Only instruction to remain calm, to proceed forward when able, and not to attempt reversing. Dispatch voice gave instructions without asking clarifying questions. From the carrier's incident ticket, while he held the phone, his marker lights flashed 3 times in quick succession, then went dark again. His hand was nowhere near the switch. From the outside, it would have looked like a courtesy signal. Marker lights flashed 3 times without any input from the driver. From the shop electrical report, Dylan's instinct screamed that the lane was not meant to be idle space. It was meant to hold him. When he shifted into gear and nudged the truck forward, a low pressure built in his ears, like altitude change in a mountain pass, except the map claimed he was still near sea level. He rolled over the clean seam in the asphalt and felt the steering lighten briefly, like the tires had crossed from one surface to another that had slightly different friction. The air smelled sharper ahead, like cold air in an underground tunnel. The corridor between trees that had not existed from his original view narrowed around him. The cones that had framed him thinned out and then vanished completely. His GPS display went gray, map tiles emptying for a short stretch before snapping back to normal rendering. Then, without transition, he was back on open highway. 1 second he was enclosed. The next, his mirrors showed the familiar wide lanes, rumble strips, and distant glow of a real exit sign. There was no sign of cones, no portable board, no gate. His rear camera feed, a small unit he had installed himself, showed nothing but wet pavement fanning out behind the trailer. Dylan did not stop. He drove until the next permanent way station came into view, lights on and properly signed, and pulled in even though his indicator said green and bypass. He preferred an interaction with a real building and a real badge over the idea of continuing alone. Inside, he asked the attendant if there had been any temporary enforcement operating behind him on that stretch. The supervisor checked the schedule and the logs for that night. There was no temporary operation scheduled or recorded on that corridor. From the way station supervisor, email Dylan filed an insurance and safety report when his shift ended, framing it around an unusual temporary checkpoint and possible equipment fault. A week later, an investigator drove the same route with him in daylight. They saw open highway, normal shoulders, no fresh asphalt patches, no posts where a gate arm could have mounted. The dash cam footage Dylan turned in told a different story. The video showed the taper, the board, and the narrowing lane with clarity. Then, for exactly 1 minute, the image degraded into gray static. The audio, however, continued without interruption, capturing the sound of his engine idling, the faint hiss of rain, and the quiet thunk of the gate arm he described. Video signal was lost for exactly 1 minute, while audio remained clear. From the claim adjuster notes, the carrier's telematics report showed a 1-minute gap in location data overlapping the same window. No other fault codes appeared. No loss of power, no restarts. 1 minute location gap noted with no associated system errors. From the telematics summary, Dylan adjusted his behavior after that night in a way that looked irrational on paper and perfectly rational inside his own skin. He stopped for clearly marked scales with state seals and proper signage. He refused to enter any roadside setup that lacked identifiers. If he saw cones and a board without logos, he took his chances with fines and wrote his justification later. He explained it simply when asked. He could argue with a citation. He could not argue with a place that behaved like law without leaving proof it had ever been there. Archival transition. A gate closed behind him with no badge to justify it. The next file involved a sealed load that stayed perfect on paper while something inside tried to speak through metal. Miguel Santos accepted the load because the dispatcher used a tone that did not invite negotiation. It was the kind of call that slid past normal banter and landed in his ear like an order dressed as a favor. The pickup was after midnight at a small cross-dock on the edge of an industrial park that usually slept by then. The yard lights burned anyway. The paperwork was thin, too thin. The bill of lading had his name, his unit, his trailer, the origin and destination. The commodity field was a single printed line, in block letters, unspecified equipment, seal required, do not open, do not inspect. Bill of lading listed the commodity as unspecified and required a seal with no exceptions. From the shipping document, Scan Miguel had hauled sealed loads before. High-value electronics, controlled pharmaceuticals, government shipments with escorts and clipboards. Those loads came with weight tickets, signatures, and chain of custody forms that looked like they had been designed by people who loved procedure more than sleep. This one came with a single seal number, a destination yard that used a post office box instead of a street address, and a bonus that made the run hard to refuse. He watched the warehouse worker snap the metal seal through the hasp on the trailer doors. He read the number aloud, wrote it on his manifest, and took a photo of the stamped digits on his phone. The trailer felt heavy when he pulled away, suspension settling with the sluggish confidence of a full load. Nothing unusual. The first hour passed under a sky with no stars, his headlights tunneling through a corridor of small towns and unlit fields. The highway narrowed, then widened again. The CB stayed quiet. The only sound was the steady whine of the engine and the occasional hiss of air brakes as he adjusted for grades. Then he heard the first knock. It came from behind his cab, through the frame, into the steering column. Not a rattle, not the chaotic bang of shifting pallets. It was measured, 3 impacts, evenly spaced. A pause, then 3 more. 3 hits, a pause, then 3 hits again, like somebody knew exactly how to count it out. From the driver's voice, Memo Miguel turned the radio off to make sure he was not mishearing something layered over static. The knocks came again, clearer, without any other noise. 3 and 3. No scrape, no drag, no follow-through, just impacts. He eased onto the shoulder, set his brakes, and stepped into the cold air with a flashlight. Gravel crunched under his boots. The highway was empty in both directions. Only the distant wash of another truck far away, moving in the opposite lane. He walked to the back of the trailer. The doors sat clean and square in the frame. The metal seal hung where it should, unbent, number still matching his manifest. He ran his hand over the hinges, over the hasp. No play, no fresh dents. Nothing to suggest someone had forced the doors or anything had struck them from outside. The knocks came while he stood there, close enough that the metal under his hand shivered. It was under my palm, like something hit the wall from the inside while I was touching it. From the driver's sworn statement, Miguel stepped back without meaning to. The pattern repeated once more. then went quiet as if acknowledging that he had heard enough. Back in the cab, he called dispatch. He framed it the way a professional would, stripping out the fear and leaving only the facts: sealed load, unknown content, unexplained impacts from within, request for permission to divert to the nearest inspection point. Dispatch listened. The voice on the other end did not sound surprised. It did not sound interested either. "Maintain speed," the dispatcher said. "Do not open the trailer. Do not divert. Deliver direct." Dispatcher refused to log my inspection request and told me to continue without delay. From the call history notes, Miguel hung up with the brittle feeling that comes when the system you rely on chooses policy over safety. He drove on. The road dipped into a stretch of forest where the shoulders narrowed and the reflectors broke up. The knocks returned. They came at intervals that felt almost conversational. When he sped up, they closed in. When he eased off, they stretched apart. He tried changing lanes, half hoping it was tire harmonics or a bad patch of pavement. The pattern stayed the same. At the next rest area with working lights, he pulled in. The lot was mostly empty. Sodium lamps hummed overhead. He parked under a camera, left the engine idling, and walked the length of the trailer again, this time with his eyes on the side panels. Near the ventilation grates, he saw fresh scars. They were thin, bright lines in the paint, not long scrapes from loading equipment, but short, parallel gouges clustered around the vents. They angled outward, as if something inside had raked at the metal near the openings, testing the weak spots. Scratches were fresh around the vent slats and looked like they pushed out from the inside, not scraped in. From the driver's photo caption, he took pictures. He checked the seal again. Intact. He placed his palm against the side wall and felt a faint, cold vibration pass through it, like an echo that had bled into metal and stayed there. Inside the cab, his dash clock rolled forward, then hung on 1 minute longer than it should have, displaying the same time twice. His ELD unit, a separate system, logged that period as a 1-minute gap in location pings. 1-minute telematics gap aligned exactly with the time I was outside checking the trailer. From the carrier telematics report, Miguel did not sleep. He drove. Rain chased him into the early hours. The highway emptied of everyone except the occasional tanker or reefer rolling in the opposite lane. The knocks returned, weaker now, like something was tiring. He caught himself counting them out loud and stopped, superstitiously afraid that responding in any rhythm would complete a circuit. Near dawn, he exited toward the destination yard printed on his bill. The road led into a small industrial cluster with low buildings and fenced lots. The address on the paperwork resolved into a warehouse with a blank facade and a chain-link gate already open. The yard lights were on. The dock lanes sat empty. There were no other trucks, no forklifts, no movement behind the dock doors. Miguel backed into the numbered bay on his paperwork. The green line on the dock control panel never changed. No one set chocks. No one bumped the trailer. No one hit the door with the lock bar. He waited longer than procedure required. The knock pattern did not return. The silence felt staged. He walked to the office door. Inside, through the glass, he saw a reception desk with a computer screen dark, a phone knocked off its cradle, and a line of muddy footprints tracked across the tile. The prints ended at a blank wall, not at a hallway, not at a door. He tried the knob. Locked. Miguel went back to the cab and called dispatch again. The line connected. Instead of a greeting, his speaker played the sound of his own engine idling, his own breathing, as if someone had recorded his previous call from inside the cab. Then the recording ended with 3 clean impacts, spaced like the knocks on the trailer wall. That call gave me my own cabin noise back. Then 3 hits that sounded exactly like the knocks. From the internal incident ticket, he ended the call without speaking and pulled away from the dock, his trailer still sealed. He left the yard through the same open gate and did what the dispatcher voice had told him not to do. He went to the nearest highway patrol station and asked for an officer to witness a seal cut. In the patrol lot, under cameras and fluorescent lights, an officer compared the number stamped on the metal seal to the number on Miguel's bill. They matched. The officer noted the fresh scratches near the vents and the driver's report of internal impacts. Exterior showed fresh gouging near ventilation openings. Seal confirmed matching paperwork. From the officer's preliminary report, they cut the seal. The metal snapped with the usual dry pop, an ordinary sound at odds with the weight of the moment. The officer swung the doors wide. The trailer was empty. No pallets, no shrink wrap, no straps. The floor showed scuff marks from previous loads, but no fresh debris. The smell inside was metallic and strangely cold, like air that had been stored too long. On the forward interior wall, where the bulkhead metal met the floor, fresh gouges ran in vertical lines. They were deeper than the ones on the outside, dug into the wall as if something had worked at it from close range. Near one corner, 3 punctures pierced the plastic wrap of a lone broken strap, evenly spaced as if testing resistance. Interior wall showed fresh linear gouges, with 3 evenly spaced punctures in residual wrap material. From the inspection photo notes, the officer wrote the report in careful language, noted no evidence of human stowaways, no sign of animals, no odor indicating organic cargo. The report did not try to explain why a sealed trailer that left a shipper heavy arrived at a patrol lot light and clean. Miguel completed the paperwork, signed where he was told, and handed over copies of his photos. The official part ended. The unofficial part stayed with him long after. He stopped accepting sealed freight from that broker. He stopped taking any load with the commodity line left blank. He began sleeping with soft earplugs in his cab, so he would not wake to any pattern of knocks he might not be able to ignore. When other drivers asked why he turned down easy money, he did not talk about whatever had been inside that trailer. He talked about policy and safety and coverage. In private, he said the worst part was not the sound itself or the empty box under official lights. The worst part was the sense that the knocking had not been trying to scare him. It had been trying to communicate in the simplest language the road offered: metal, rhythm, and attention. Archival transition. A sealed trailer arrived empty and scarred from the inside. The next file involved a man in a uniform whose badge carried no name and whose questions sounded like they came from inside a glove box he should not have seen. Hank Calder ran a dedicated lane between small-town suppliers and a city distribution hub. His weeks looked nearly identical on paper. Same pickup windows, same delivery docks, same 200 miles of 2-lane and interstate stitched together by habit. He lived by checklists, fuel logs, pre-trip inspections, seal numbers written twice, an organized cab that made surprise less likely. On a cold weeknight after a late delivery, he pulled into a small-town truck stop that sat just off a state highway. The place was old, but not abandoned. Cameras watched the fuel island and front row. The back lot, where the older trucks slept, fell into patchy shadows. Hank parked deliberately in the overlap, close enough to the pumps to catch some light, far enough back to avoid constant traffic. He killed the engine, locked the doors, and set his clipboard on the steering wheel. Paperwork first, sleep second. That was how mistakes stayed small. The knock came soft, then precise. 3 taps on the driver's side door, evenly spaced. Not the impatient pounding of another driver, not the casual slap of someone asking for a jump. It sounded like someone tapping knuckles against the metal to test where it ended and where it began. Hank looked out his window and saw the uniform. The man below wore dark trousers with a stripe, a duty belt, and a shirt with patches on both sleeves. In low sodium light, the patches read as official shapes without names. The chest held a metal badge that reflected hard, but when Hank narrowed his gaze, he saw no seal, no emblem, no state name. Badge had a blank strip where the name should be, and the center was just a pattern of lines like a barcode. From the driver's written statement, the man did not stand directly under the light. He had positioned himself at the angle where the security camera above the pump could not see his face, only the top of his cap and the outline of his shoulders. He lifted a hand toward the window, palm open, a universal gesture that said, "Open up, nothing to worry about." Hank did not open up. He cracked the side curtain instead and watched. The man pointed at the door latch, then tapped again. 3 knocks, the same spacing, a practiced rhythm. The questions began without Hank saying yes or no. The man spoke loud enough for Hank to hear through the glass, but not loud enough for anyone at the pumps to notice. He asked about Hank's route, his starting point, his last scale. He named the city distribution hub correctly. Then he stepped sideways, further from the camera's field, and asked about things he should not have known. He referenced the spare key fob I keep in a cloth pouch in the glove box, and the small photo tucked behind my registration. From the driver's voice, Memo Hank's cab layout was his own. The spare fob sat in an old flannel pouch his daughter had made. The photo was a faded print of her with a cardboard crown at a school party. He kept it behind the registration card in a clear sleeve, visible only if someone lifted the paperwork completely out. The man's blank badge caught a sliver of light as he shifted. Up close, Hank saw that the center was not polished metal at all. It was a flat insert etched with tight lines that resembled a code. He pulled his phone up under the dash, opened a generic scanner app, and aimed at the glass as if checking a fuel receipt. The app registered a rectangle and then froze. No result, no error, just a loading icon that spun for a long time and then snapped back to the home screen. Scanner app recognized a code shape but never returned any data. From the phone diagnostic export, Hank chose procedure over instinct. He set his phone to record audio, placed it on the dash, and dialed the local non-emergency police number. He did not mention fear. He mentioned an unidentified person in a uniform with no name. That was language the system understood. The call connected. The dispatcher's voice sounded ordinary. They took his location, description, and unit number and said a patrol car was nearby. Later, the carrier record would show something that did not match his memory. The network timestamp put the start of the call exactly 1 minute earlier than the time displayed on Hank's phone screen. Carrier log timestamp was 1 minute ahead of the time shown on my handset. From the phone company record outside, the uniformed man shifted further away from the camera's angle. He never lifted his eyes fully to the window. His gaze stayed just below Hank's line of sight, as if focused on the dash layout, the glove box, the little photo he should not have been able to see. Hank refused to unlatch the door. The man's expression did not change. He asked again about the glove box, this time more specific. He mentioned the color of the flannel pouch, the pattern on it, a detail Hank had never photographed or shared. He described the cloth pouch in the glove box down to the color of the stripes. From the driver's supplemental statement, red and gray stripes, his daughter's choice. The man's voice carried the detail like a fact checked off a list. The sound of approaching sirens arrived in the distance, faint but rising. Blue and red reflected off the pump canopy. The uniformed man tilted his head slightly, as if listening with interest rather than concern. Then he moved. He stepped backward along the side of the cab, staying on the line where camera coverage thinned. Hank tracked him in the mirror and lost him between his trailer and the dark shape of an older rig parked 1 space over. The gap between the two was narrow but passable. The patrol car pulled into the lot 20 seconds later, fully marked, light bar active, its dash camera and the officer's body camera captured the approach, the lines of trucks, the lit storefront. They did not capture the man Hank described. Officer advanced toward the area indicated and reported losing visual with no obvious path of egress. From the responding officer's report, the officer walked to the gap between Hank's trailer and the neighboring rig. Body cam footage showed him stop at the entrance to the shadowed lane and hesitate, as if expecting to see someone there. The audio picked up his breathing and the hiss of idling engines. He took 2 more steps and then turned his head, scanning the lot. No figure emerged, no door closed, nothing moved. The truck stop manager later pulled the security footage. The cameras showed Hank's rig, the pumps, and the cruiser's arrival. For a window of 1 minute, straddling the patrol car entering the lot, the rear camera feed degraded into gray static while the audio channel kept recording ambient noise. Backlot camera experienced a 1-minute video dropout concurrent with patrol arrival. Audio remained intact. From the security contractor note, after that minute, the picture returned. The lane between Hank's trailer and the neighboring truck was empty. No uniformed man, no motion blur, no sign of someone walking away. The officer circled the property, checked bathrooms, checked behind the building, checked the highway shoulder. No one matching Hank's description appeared. The officer took down the details and treated the report as a suspicious person call that ended without contact. Hank started his engine with hands that did not feel entirely steady. He told himself to chalk it up to a scammer with a convincing outfit. Then he checked his driver's side mirror before pulling out and saw it. A faint, clear dot on the underside of the housing, not a raindrop. Not dirt, it was a small, nearly invisible adhesive disc with a notch cut out of one side, positioned where headlights from behind would catch it in intermittent flashes. Recovered a clear adhesive marker with a notch from the underside of the side mirror housing. From the maintenance shop receipt, he scraped it off with his fingernail and stuck it to an empty fuel receipt, which went into an envelope instead of the trash. Underneath, the plastic felt slightly rough, as if something had scored it from the inside of the casing. The next week, on a different run, Hank noticed something he could not comfortably label coincidence. As he pulled into another truck stop 100 miles away, he saw a white pickup with no company markings idling at the far edge of the lot. Its headlights flashed 3 times in his direction, then shut off. When he left an hour later, a similar white pickup merged in behind him on the highway and held distance for several exits before dropping away. His CB, which he kept mostly quiet, crackled at odd moments with a carrier tone and silence, followed by the faint sound of someone breathing near an open mic. They started saying my unit number on the air without a call sign, then just breathing. From the driver's audio note, Hank brought the mirror marker to his company's maintenance shop. The tech logged it as possible tracking hardware, but could not identify any electronics inside the adhesive. The residue tested as common industrial glue. The tech reported a faint pattern of scratches on the inside of the mirror cover, 3 short lines close together like a tally carved absent-mindedly. Interior of mirror cover showed 3 short etched lines consistent with intentional marking. From the shop work order after that, Hank changed his rules. Any inspection request came through dispatch and verifiable channels only. Anyone approaching his cab with a badge he could not read got a closed window and a call to a real number. He moved his spare key fob and his daughter's photo to a place no casual glance could reach. What unsettled him was not just that a man in a uniform had asked the wrong questions. It was that the questions sounded like a script written by something that already knew his cab by memory, line by line, and wanted only one thing it did not yet have: his unlocked door, archival transition. A blank badge behaved like a checkpoint without a department. The next file began with a girl asking for a ride to a destination without an address, and ended with unmarked vehicles holding formation in every blind spot his mirrors could not reach. Cole Danner ran regional lanes that stitched together warehouse towns and gas station edges of small places, most maps barely named. His runs kept him close enough to home that he knew which truck stops were safer, which diners stayed open past midnight, and which lots had blind corners he did not like. He had a standing rule for himself: no riders, no hitchhikers, no favors, no just to the next town. It was less about company policy and more about keeping the truck a closed system. Freight, paperwork, fuel, sleep. No extra variables. On a damp evening in late autumn, he pulled into a mid-sized truck stop just off a state highway. The lot was half full, the kind of in-between crowd where there were enough witnesses to feel safer, but not enough noise to hide anything strange. Fluorescent lights hummed over the fuel islands. The convenience store was cleaning up for the night. The girl stood near the entrance when he went in. She was young enough to look out of place in that hour and that air. No backpack, no duffel, clothes that looked like they had been put on recently, without the dust and wrinkles the road put on fabric. She did not scan the lot like people did when they were desperate for a ride. Her gaze tracked specific trucks as if checking a list. Cole bought coffee, paid cash, and kept his eyes down. When he came back out, the girl had shifted closer, near the curb where the sidewalk met the first row of parking. Not quite in his path, but close enough that he could not pretend not to see. She asked for a ride, not loudly, not dramatically, calm as if this part was scripted. She did not give an address. She described a place instead, a turnoff after a certain overpass, a road without a sign, a cluster of lights past the storage tanks. The description was precise in landmarks and empty of names. Her directions were all landmarks, no street names, no town name, nothing I could type in. From the driver's written statement, Cole did what he always did. He said he could not take passengers, company policy, insurance, safety, the usual reasons. He expected pushback, pleading, anger. The girl only stepped aside. Her eyes stayed on his trailer longer than on his face, as if the box behind him mattered more than the person in front of her. He drove away, intending to file the encounter under roadside awkwardness and forget it. The lot did not behave like it wanted to be forgotten. At the end of the driveway near the exit lane, he saw the girl again. She stood at the edge of the lot where trucks pulled forward to merge. The same posture, the same clothing, hair unmoved by the light wind that tugged at trash near the curb. Cole had not seen her walk there in his mirrors. There were no other cars idling nearby that she could have stepped from. She appeared near my exit lane without me seeing her cross open ground. From the driver's written statement, he turned onto the frontage road that paralleled the highway. Sodium lights reflected in his mirrors. He checked them out of habit and caught a glimpse of the girl once more, farther down near the access ramp, standing in the triangle of gravel where trucks sometimes staged before merging. The gaps between these sightings were seconds, not minutes. The distances did not make sense for a person on foot. Cole gripped the wheel harder and focused on the merge. His CB was on but idle, volume low, set to a channel he used for local traffic. The speaker opened without the usual courtesy break. A voice came through that sounded like a navigation system wearing human cadence. No call sign, no slang, no anybody got a copy. It spoke in neutral tone and gave him instructions framed as suggestions. Voice described a route using the same landmarks the girl had used, with no road names or mile markers. From the driver's dash recorder notes, the voice described the same overpass, the same unmarked turn, the same cluster of lights past the tanks. It did not mention a city or exit number. It sounded like guidance written for someone who had already agreed to follow. Cole did not agree. He stayed on the main highway and brought his speed up to match traffic. Night closed in around him. the line of trees along the right shoulder forming a tunnel. His mirrors picked up headlights sliding into position. One vehicle to the left rear, one to the right rear, both sitting just so that he could see the edge of their beams, but not their full shape. Two vehicles stayed there. They did not crowd him. They did not pass. They rode the blind spots like they had trained for it. Two vehicles maintained blind spot position for more than 20 minutes with no attempt to pass or fall back. From the carrier camera system summary, Cole tested them without making it obvious. He changed lanes gradually. The lights shifted with him, re-establishing the same positions. He adjusted speed. They mirrored. The gap between him and the next visible cluster of traffic stayed elastic, as if the world had stretched into segments. Him, the shadowing vehicles, then everyone else. His dash clock blinked. The minutes rolled, then flicked backward by one, then corrected. His phone sat in its cradle, recording route history quietly. Later, the location log would show a missing chunk of time, a 1-minute gap where no coordinates recorded, even though the truck never stopped. 1-minute location gap appeared in phone logs during the same segment when the vehicles held formation. From the phone location history export, the girl kept coming back to his mind, not because of what she had said, but because of how she had said it. Her phrasing had matched the CB voice. Same order of landmarks, same absence of names. The radio voice spoke again. It mentioned an easier place to pull off ahead. It mentioned less scale activity on that unnamed road. It sounded helpful, concerned even. The words did not match the feeling. Cole made a choice that people in his line of work sometimes described later as the one good decision they had made that night. He did not follow the suggestion. He took the next exit clearly marked for a small town he knew by name. The vehicles in his blind spots adjusted as if to stay with him, then hesitated when they saw what he aimed for. Cole drove past the gas stations, past the closed diners, straight to the low building with the flag outside and the sign that said police in reflective letters. The lot in front of it had cameras he could point to and officers who had paperwork. He pulled in, set his brakes, and left the engine running with all his exterior lights on. In his mirrors, he saw the two vehicles slow at the intersection. They did not turn into the lot. They idled at the edge of the frame like animals testing a fence line. Then their headlights flashed. 3 quick bursts from one, 3 from the other, perfectly synchronized, followed by both vehicles rolling forward and disappearing down the road in single file. Both vehicles flashed headlights 3 times in sequence, then departed together. From the driver's voice memo, inside the station, Cole spoke in the language that made sense to officers. Suspicious vehicles, possible stalking, concerns about personal safety on a night route. He did not mention a girl who appeared in more than one place. He did not mention a radio voice describing roads without names. The officer at the front desk pulled up the exterior camera feed. The video showed Cole's truck entering the lot. It showed the road beyond the intersection under streetlights. It did not show the 2 vehicles at all, even though Cole remembered them clearly. A technician later examined the footage and found a 1-minute section where the camera had recorded only a flat smear of gray and light, as if the street view had lost resolution just when it needed it most. Front lot camera experienced a 1-minute degradation in image quality during time of reported vehicle presence. No objects distinguishable. From the station maintenance log, Cole sat in the light of the station lobby and listened to the quiet. His CB, left on in the truck with volume low, did not record any further transmissions during his time inside. His phone stopped showing location gaps once he was under the station's roof. When he returned to his truck an hour later, the air in the cab felt normal. The mirrors showed only his own reflection and a clean stretch of road beyond. He spent the rest of that week replaying details in his head. The way the girl had spoken like a script, The way the vehicles had held exactly to the edges of what he could see. The way the voice on the CB had woven guidance into concern. He kept coming back to the same conclusion. Whatever wanted him off the main road did not ask for force. It structured conditions so that saying yes would feel easiest. An offered ride, a quieter route, a safer pull-off. The trucks in his blind spots behaved like escort cars for a convoy he had declined to join. Cole tightened his own rules after that. No riders, ever. No turns based on descriptions without names. No following CB advice that sounded like it came from nowhere in particular. He also added one more habit. Whenever a voice on the radio spoke without a call sign, he looked around for cameras first and made sure someone else's system, not just his own, would see where he chose to drive. Archival transition. A girl and two silent escorts tried to guide a truck toward a point the map refused to name. The next file followed a driver who trusted his navigation once too often and rolled into a truck stop that printed receipts with a date from another year and looked at him like he had arrived out of sequence. Trevor Lane had made his peace with detours, construction, closures, surprise lane shifts. Those were just part of running freight through small-town corridors and aging interstates. His rule was simple. If the map said a route shaved off time and did not break company policy, he would try it once. If it worked, it became part of his mental atlas. If it did not, he never used it again. On a rainy night in early fall, a major interchange on his usual route was closed entirely. Arrow boards pushed traffic off the interstate and onto a state highway that dropped him into darker terrain. Two-lane blacktop, no median, ditches full of standing water, reflective paint dulled by years of weather and weight. His dash navigation recalculated twice and then presented an option in a calm, synthetic voice. A connector appeared on the map as a gray line labeled simply as service route. It looked like it cut across the grid and brought him back to the interstate miles ahead of the detour traffic. Trevor hesitated for a second and then followed his own rule. Try it once. The pavement changed within a mile. The smooth blacktop gave way to older asphalt with hairline cracks that spread like dry riverbeds. The lane markings were slightly uneven, as if repainted by a smaller crew with older equipment. The reflectors embedded along the center line were glass buttons instead of plastic tabs, throwing his headlights back in sharp crystalline points. It felt like I had dropped into an older version of the same road. From the driver's audio log, his phone lost data service in a place where he usually kept at least a weak signal. The small icon flickered, then grayed out entirely. His dash clock advanced, then rolled back 1 minute, then jumped forward again. His ELD, wired to the truck, recorded steady progress without any hiccup. He drove for what his sense of time judged to be 10 to 15 minutes. The map stopped naming cross streets and showed only the blue dot, advancing along an unlabeled line. Then a truck stop appeared, where the map showed nothing. It sat in a shallow dip off the right side of the road, canopy lights glowing warm and dim through the rain. The sign at the entrance was a tall wooden post with a hand-painted board. The name was unfamiliar. The paint had faded at the edges, but the letters were still clear. It looked like a truck stop that forgot what decade it belonged to. From the driver's audio log Trevor turned in, partly because he needed fuel, partly because the lot was the first structured light he had seen since leaving the interstate. The transition from road to lot felt oddly steep, like rolling over the lip of something that did not want to be crossed. The pumps were old mechanical units with analog dials instead of digital displays. The price per gallon was posted on a metal board with press-on numbers, and the cost looked low enough to be wrong for the current year. The handles were heavier. The hoses smelled more sharply of raw fuel. Inside, the diner portion smelled like frying grease and cigarette smoke baked into the walls over years. A ceiling fan turned slowly. Fluorescent tubes hummed. There were ashtrays on the tables. An older television in the corner played muted static with occasional flickers of a weather forecast template from a network graphic package that should have been retired decades earlier. The cashier rang him up on a mechanical register. The cash drawer slid on metal rails with a hard sound. When the receipt printed, the chatter of the dot matrix mechanism made the hair on his arms rise before he could say, "Why?" The date line printed as December of 1983. Receipt date printed as December 1983, not the current year. From the receipt photograph caption, Trevor stared at the paper for a second too long. The cashier did not comment. The other customers scattered along the diner counter and in a few booths wore denim jackets, trucker caps with logos he recognized from old photos, and boots that looked broken in by long work rather than fashion. No one spoke to him. They looked at him in unison when he stepped away from the counter, then returned to stillness. Every head turned when I walked in, like they were waiting to see if I would notice something. From the driver's written statement, he stepped outside into the rain with the receipt between his fingers and his coffee in a thin paper cup that did not bear any modern branding. He took a photo of the receipt with his phone out of habit. The phone had no service, but the camera app worked. Later, the image file metadata would show a timestamp 1 minute ahead of the time recorded in his handwritten log for the same moment. Photo metadata timestamp was 1 minute ahead of my written log time for the same action. From the phone diagnostic export, when Trevor walked around the rear of his trailer for a routine check, he saw chalk on the door. Someone had drawn a simple symbol near the latch. 3 short vertical strokes, a small gap, 3 more strokes, like a tally or a fragmented barcode. The lines were clean and bright despite the rain. He wiped the mark away with the heel of his hand. White dust smeared across the metal, and then, as he stepped back under the canopy light, the symbol reappeared, darker than before, as if drawn from beneath the paint rather than on top of it. Chalk symbol reappeared immediately after removal attempt. From dash camera still notes, Trevor felt the air change as he climbed back into his cab. The sound profile of the lot shifted, the distant hum of another idling truck, the hiss of rain on the canopy roof, the clink of someone moving dishes inside. All of it became slightly muffled, as if heard through insulation. His GPS screen showed the truck icon parked in empty gray space. The service route line had vanished. No road names, no cross streets, just the icon with a compass bearing. He decided to leave. The lot was larger than it had looked on approach, with multiple rows of parking that seemed to stretch farther back than the property line should have allowed. As he drove slowly, turning between rows, he passed the same chipped light pole and the same cracked section of pavement more than once. A broken sign with missing letters appeared on his left, then on his right, then ahead. It felt like driving inside a looped scene. The same pole, the same broken sign kept coming around. From the driver's audio log, his chest tightened. He picked a direction and committed, aiming for the glow of the road beyond the entrance. His CB, which he kept on for emergency chatter, clicked open on its own. There was no break request, no call sign, just a short burst of audio that sounded like an old weather bulletin, complete with a mention of a storm system that had occurred decades earlier. Then, over the carrier, his own voice played back a sentence he had muttered in the diner while checking his logbook. He had not been near the radio when he said it. That was my voice from inside the diner, coming back through the CB 1 minute later. From the driver's dash recorder notes, the GPS display went fully blank for a stretch that Trevor later estimated as 1 mile. When the map returned, the blue dot sat on an interstate ramp he recognized. The road ahead opened into the familiar curve of his normal route, with modern signage and digital price boards at the next visible exit. Behind him in his mirrors, there was no sign of the hand-painted truck stop. Rain blurred the shoulder into a continuous gray. His phone buzzed back to life as signal returned. Messages queued up. Clocks synchronized themselves. The receipt in his pocket, folded once and damp at the edges, felt colder than the rest of the paper around it. By the time he reached his delivery point at mid-morning, the ink on the dateline had already faded slightly, as if it had aged years in a few hours. A few days later, unsettled by the detail he could not dismiss, Trevor contacted a small investigative firm that occasionally did work for carriers after incidents. He sent them a photograph of the sign, the name of the stop, and the rough area on the map where he believed he had turned off. The investigator searched state business archives, fuel tax records, and old trucking directories. The summary came back thin. Business name not found in state records, fuel permits, or historical truck stop directories for the region. From the private investigator's summary, telematics from Trevor's truck showed a 1-minute gap in location data during the window he spent at the stop, as if the truck had ceased to exist on the grid long enough for systems to disagree about where he had been. 1-minute location gap recorded, while engine RPM and wheel speed indicated continuous operation. From the fleet telematics report, Trevor sealed the original receipt in a plastic sleeve and placed it in a folder away from light. Any time he took it out to look at it, the paper seemed a little more brittle, the print a little more ghosted, like something consuming the evidence from the inside. He described the worst part not as the wrong year on the paper or the vanishing stop. It was the expression on the faces in the diner when he walked in. No surprise, no welcome, just a collective look that said he did not belong in the sequence they understood, and the quiet expectation that the road would correct that mistake, one detour at a time. Archival transition. A detour delivered him to a place that printed the wrong year and refused to exist in any record. The next file left the strange truck stops behind and returned to a simpler pattern that traveled with the driver. 3 knocks on the cab door around 3 in the morning, night after night, in different lots and different states, as if the road itself had learned a ritual. Aaron Pike treated sleep like another part of his route plan. He did not crash in the bunk. He scheduled rest the way he scheduled fuel and scale tickets. He ran lanes designed for team operations by himself because he trusted his own timing more than anyone else's, and he accepted the cost. Shorter sleep windows, lighter sleep, nerves always half awake. He had rules. He backed into spaces only when he could keep an exit route. He chose spots where cameras reached and lights stayed on. He locked both doors, set the alarm on his phone, logged his hours on the electronic log, and noted the rest area name in a paper notebook he kept within arm's reach. On a wind-beaten stretch of Plains Highway in late winter, weather and hours pushed him into a state rest area well before dawn. The rain had turned to a mix of sleet and mist that flattened the grass and turned the concrete walks slick. He parked nose in under the sodium lights, nose pointed toward the exit, rear doors visible in his mirrors, and shut down. He checked his dash clock. It read 2:59 in the morning. He killed the lights, pulled the curtain, lay down, and half an eye blink later, he was awake again. 3 precise knocks hit the driver's side door, not a fist, not the sloppy pattern of someone angry or drunk. 3 evenly spaced impacts on metal, like someone following instructions. 3 knocks, then nothing. It felt like a rule being followed. From the driver's sleep log, Aaron did what seasoned drivers did when something did not match the pattern. He did not move at first. He listened. His truck rocked slightly in the wind. Air lines hissed as pressure equalized. The knocks did not repeat. He checked his phone. 3:01 in the morning. He eased the curtain back half an inch and looked at his mirrors. No silhouettes, no movement. The lot was sparsely occupied, a few other trucks idling far enough away that their marker lights were pinpricks through the mist. Eventually, he stepped into his boots, grabbed a flashlight, and opened the passenger door, climbing down on that side to give himself a little distance. Under the driver's side step, in the wet grit, a single set of boot prints waited. They were sharply outlined, tread blocks crisp, water pooled cleanly in the deeper grooves. There were no approach tracks leading in from the lane or the sidewalk, no departing tracks leading away. The prints began directly beneath the step and ended there. Footwear impressions present directly under driver's step. No approach or departure tracks observed. From the State Trooper Field report, Aaron called the non-emergency number listed on the rest area sign and reported suspicious knocking. A trooper responded, walked the lot, and took quick photos of the prints before the weather degraded them. The trooper's notes logged the time of arrival as 3:20 in the morning. Aaron's phone, when checked later, showed the call connecting at 3:19, even though his dash log read 3:18 at the time he dialed. He left when his off-duty period allowed, telling himself it was a prank or another driver with a bad sense of humor. The boot prints, the missing approach tracks, the slight time mismatch could all live under the heading of a strange night. They did not stay there. 2 nights later, in a different state, on a different run, weather calmer and lot busier, he parked at a private truck stop with an attached diner and cameras posted at each corner of the building. His company considered it a preferred location. He noted the time in his log as 2:58 in the morning, when he finally shut the engine down for a short off-duty window. He fell asleep to the sound of other trucks idling and the occasional whine of a reefer cycling on. At 3 in the morning, 3 knocks hit his driver's side door. They were the same cadence, the same spacing, the same restrained force that suggested intention rather than impatience. I woke up fully alert the second knock landed. I already knew it would be 3. From the driver's audio memo, this time he did not go outside. He stared at the door handle silhouette and watched the minute tick over on his dash. 300 stayed in place longer than it should have, before rolling to 301, a stutter his eyes caught even if his instruments would not admit it. In the morning, he asked the cashier if the lot cameras faced his row. They did. He requested that someone check the feed for the interval around 3 in the morning. The security contractor pulled the clip and later produced a short written note. Audio channel captured 3 distinct impacts on cab door. No subject visible in frame during the event window. From the truck stop security note, the video stream had remained stable. No artifacts, no snow, no color drop. A parked tractor sat still under light. The sound of 3 knocks on metal existed in the audio track with no visual cause. Aaron started logging incidents more formally after that. Date, location, rest period, start time, dash clock reading, phone time, knock time, any irregularity. He did not tell the company. He did not want the pattern to become a question of fitness for duty. The 3rd knock event came at a company yard, not a public lot. He had parked within the fenced area under bright white LED lights near the maintenance bay. Yard cameras watched. His keys were turned in at the office. He grabbed a blanket and decided to sleep a few hours in the bunk rather than drive to a motel and back. He checked his watch before closing his eyes. 2:59. At 3 in the morning, the same 3 knocks tapped his driver door. This time he heard something else layered beneath the impacts. A faint intake of breath and a long exhale right at the end. Close enough that if there had been a person, they would have fogged the glass. There was breathing right after the knocks. The window stayed clear. From the driver's voice memo, he remained still and did not respond. The breathing stopped. The yard remained quiet. Maintenance pulled a copy of the yard camera footage the next day. The camera pointed directly at his row, recorded clean video of his truck sitting inert. No movement at the door, no shadow, no visitor. For 60 seconds of real time around the incident, the audio track, normally empty in a fenced yard, showed 3 clear spikes corresponding to metal impacts. The internal logging on the recording system flagged that minute as channel anomaly and rolled to the next segment. System flagged 1-minute segment as audio anomaly. No video variance detected. From the yard security system, Log Aaron upgraded his own surveillance. He installed a small motion-activated light beneath his driver's side step, aimed downward to catch any approach. He added a dedicated camera just for the door handle, storing the footage on an independent memory card. He told himself that whatever was knocking would either trigger a light and show up on video, or the events would stop once he made recording obvious. The events did not stop. At a highway service plaza a week later, he parked under a tall pole light, marked the time in his notebook as 2:57, and lay down. He woke at 3 in the morning to 3 knocks and stared up at the ceiling of the sleeper. The motion light under his step never came on. His dedicated camera recorded a full night of footage with 1 gap. Recording corrupted and unrecoverable for 1-minute interval spanning 3 in the morning. From the dash camera system log, when he reviewed the files later, the images jumped from 2:59 to 3:01 without transition. The door handle did not move. The weather pattern on the pavement shifted only by the amount of rain that would have fallen in that span. The internal log on the camera flagged a write error during that exact minute with no clear hardware fault. The next morning he found new evidence not subject to electronics. A faint smear on the driver door handle, darker than the surrounding paint, like skin oil rubbed repeatedly into metal. The mark measured longer than a normal human palm would have, more like a narrow band pulled along the handle and then lifted. Residue pattern and length inconsistent with normal human handling of door handle. From the maintenance inspection report, he brought the truck to the shop and requested testing. The maintenance department wiped the residue and logged the concern as a cosmetic issue, but the technician who handled the work order noted a subjective impression in a brief comment. Technician reports unusual tactile sensation when cleaning handle, described as slightly cold and tacky despite ambient temperature. From the shop work order note, Aaron finally reported the pattern to his company's safety coordinator in language that would not sound like folklore. He described repeated late-night disturbances, unknown persons knocking and leaving no tracks, unknown contamination of the handle, and security footage that showed audio without source. The coordinator opened an internal ticket and requested telematics data for the nights in question. The telematics review returned one consistent anomaly: multiple 1-minute gaps in location ping data aligned with reported disturbance times, engine parameters unchanged during gaps. From the fleet telematics summary, the truck did not vanish from the physical world. Engine revolutions per minute, coolant temperature, and battery voltage stayed within expected ranges. Only the GPS component failed to register position for exactly 60 seconds during each incident window, then resumed as if nothing had happened. After the 5th recorded event, Aaron changed his routine completely. He stopped sleeping in the cab. He began budgeting for motels, even when it cut into margins. If no motel existed nearby, he slept in the truck stop lounge or in a chair near windows. Never in the sleeper, never behind a closed curtain where knocks could find him at exactly 3 in the morning. The ritual did not appear to care. On mornings after heavy rain, when he walked back out to his truck from a motel or a building, he sometimes found fresh impressions under his driver's side step. Not always boots, sometimes partial shapes, elongated ovals with blurred edges pressed into mud in a way that suggested weight without gait. They still began beneath the step and ended there, as if whatever created them arrived without crossing the rest of the lot. It keeps coming to the door even when I am not inside, like the act of knocking is separate from whether anyone hears it. From the driver's later statement, Aaron began choosing routes that ended at terminals where he could hand off his truck and go home instead of sleeping near the road. He declined certain overnight assignments. His reputation shifted from that of a driver who would take anything to a driver who preferred day runs and company facilities. He never learned what, if anything, stood on the other side of the door during those 1-minute windows when cameras glitched and audio spikes marked the sound of knuckles or something like them on metal. What bothered him most, and what stayed in his voice when he gave his statement later, was not the fear of what might happen if he opened the door. It was the recognition that the pattern had patience. The knocks did not escalate in volume or violence. They did not vary. They repeated night after night, location after location, at the same time plus the same uncooperative minute, as if some service on the edge of the road had adopted a simple procedure: 3 knocks, 1 minute missing, try again. Archival transition, a ritual kept visiting the cab, practicing at the door whether the driver was inside or not. The next file began with a nearly invisible mark on a mirror, and with it, a new pattern, a voice on the air that seemed to know every turn a driver would make before he touched the wheel. Jordan Beck still tried to live by the old code of the road. He had come up under drivers who believed that you stopped when someone was broken down, that you gave rides in winter when the shoulder looked lethal, that you answered calls on the CB from people who sounded tired rather than drunk. It had not made him rich, but it had given him a way to look at himself in the visor mirror without flinching. By the time this incident began, Jordan hauled regional freight for a carrier that fed small towns from larger hubs. His routes threaded through stretches of 2-lane highway that lost cell service as soon as the hills rose and regained it only near gas stations with flickering signs. He knew the exits, the decent food, the bad lots, and the shoulders where the gravel looked stable enough to hold 40 tons without eating a tire. Near dusk on a damp evening in early fall, he saw hazard flashers blinking ahead on a narrow shoulder just outside a town that had already gone dark. The last gas station sign showed no glow in his mirror. A compact car sat canted slightly toward the ditch, hood up, one figure standing beside it and waving. Jordan checked his mirrors, signaled, eased onto the shoulder ahead of the car, and pulled far enough forward to give them room. His own hazard lights clicked on, steady and dutiful. Up close, the situation felt wrong around the edges. The engine bay under the lifted hood looked too clean for the road. No wet dust, no road film, no spider web of leaked fluids. The exposed metal surfaces shone like catalog photos. The air above the engine did not shimmer with heat the way it should have if the car had limped to a stop. The person beside the car, hood up, arm lowered now that he had stopped, wore clothing that matched the weather but stood oddly still. When Jordan walked back along his trailer, he noticed something that tightened his stomach more than the clean engine. The person did not look up to meet his eyes. They stared at his driver's side mirror instead. They watched my mirror, not me, like the glass was more important than the truck or the person getting out of it. From the driver's written statement, Jordan kept his distance on instinct. He asked if they had called roadside service and saw the phone in their hand. The screen was on, backlight glowing, but no carrier name, no time, no icons. Just an empty field of light, as if the interface had not loaded. The person tilted the phone slightly toward his truck, not toward him. Their gaze never left the mirror housing. Jordan backed away slowly, his senses telling him something was off in a way he could not yet express in the language of reports. He returned to his cab, climbed in, and locked both doors with a double check. His CB had been off. He preferred silence when he was not listening for weather or construction updates. As he settled into the seat, the unit crackled, powered itself, and opened carrier. A voice came through. It spoke his unit number in a calm, neutral tone that sounded like a dispatcher reading a record. Then it described the small sticker on his dashboard, the one his daughter had given him, tucked low enough that it could not be seen from ground level without pressing close to the glass. It mentioned my kid's sticker on the dash, the one you have to lean inside to notice. Nobody outside sees that. From the driver's voice memo, Jordan reached for the power switch and turned the radio off. The carrier tone died. The silence felt louder. He checked his mirrors before pulling away. The hazards on the small car still blinked. The hood remained open. The person stood in the same place, head turned to keep the mirror in view as he eased forward and rejoined the lane. He drove until his hands stopped shaking. At the next fuel stop, one of his regular chains with good lighting and cameras on every island, he decided to inventory his rig instead of pretending the unease would fade on its own. He walked a slow circle, checking tires, seals, lights, the usual points. When he reached the driver's side mirror, he saw it. Beneath the housing, where the plastic met the support arm, a clear dot clung to the surface. It was the size of a small shirt button, almost invisible until the canopy light caught it and threw back a faint inward glow. Up close, it had a simple design, a circle with a small notch missing, like a stylized letter or a tally mark interrupted. He scraped at it with a fingernail. The dot peeled off with a soft resistance and left a faint ring of adhesive residue. A transparent circular marker removed from mirror housing, adhesive residue remaining. From the evidence bag label, he stuck the disc to a scrap of receipt paper, folded it, and slid it into his logbook. Then he called his carrier's safety line and reported a suspected attempt to tag his vehicle. The safety officer suggested he bring the truck to a company shop when possible. In the meantime, Jordan continued his route. The white pickup appeared 2 stops later. He noticed it first at a small town fuel station. Older pumps, gravel lot, a single canopy. A white half-ton pickup idled near the outer edge of the property facing the road. No company markings, no visible plate from his angle. He logged it mentally as background. When he stopped at a different station 3 hours down the line, the same model sat at the perimeter again. Same minor dent in the rear bumper, same sticker shadow on the back window where something had been removed. The plates, when he tried to zoom in on them in his mirror, refused to stay in focus, headlights from passing cars flaring across them at just the wrong moment. I started seeing the same white pickup at different stops, with the same dent and sticker shadow, always just outside the good light. From the driver's later statement, on the third encounter in a rest area on a completely different highway, the pattern solidified. The pickup pulled in after him, parked at the far end, and sat with engine off and lights out. As Jordan prepared to sleep, the pickup's headlights flashed 3 times, paused, then flashed 3 times again before it rolled silently back onto the ramp and disappeared. His CB opened the moment the pickup moved. A voice, calm, genderless in the way radio sometimes made people, spoke his unit number and then described the exit he would take in 1 hour. It named the town. It named the truck stop adjacent to the ramp. It sounded less like a threat and more like navigation guidance, given in the tone of someone reading from a route plan. It started telling me my next exit before I had even committed to the route. From the driver's audio journal, Jordan tried to throw it off by changing his plan. He skipped the announced exit and stayed on the highway longer. The voice did not react immediately. 1 minute later, his speaker clicked and played a new line in a voice that sounded like his own, confirming the exit he had just passed as if he had taken it. That was my voice agreeing to a turn I never made, like a recording from a version of me that obeyed. From the driver's audio journal, he switched channels. The voice followed. He muted the radio. His phone, sitting in its cradle, lit up and opened his memo app without touch. For a brief second, he saw the waveform of his own breathing scroll across the screen before it went dark again. His carrier pulled telematics at his request a few days later. The data showed a clean timeline of engine hours, speed, and route, with short, repeating anomalies. On multiple nights in multiple locations, the location pings froze for exactly 1 minute and then resumed, with no corresponding change in speed or heading. Multiple 1-minute gaps in location data recorded, engine parameters normal during each gap. From the fleet telematics summary, Jordan took the truck to a company shop and requested a full inspection of the mirror housing. A technician removed the cover, checked wiring, and looked for anything that did not belong. They found no electronic device, no transmitter, no aftermarket component. Inside the plastic on the interior surface that faced the arm, the technician noticed something else. An etched mark, shallow but deliberate, lay scratched into the plastic. 3 short lines, a small gap, 3 more short lines, the same pattern he had seen in other files and on chalk marks left on trailer doors in cases he did not yet know connected to his own. Interior mirror cover showed shallow etched symbol resembling 3 strokes, gap, 3 strokes. From the shop work order, the clear dot he had peeled from the outside tested as adhesive polymer consistent with certain types of asset tracking stickers, but no serial number, logo, or manufacturer information appeared under magnification. It was a marker designed to be anonymous. After the shop visit, Jordan's behavior shifted in ways that were easy to document and hard for him to explain without involving words, like hunted. He stopped pulling over for disabled vehicles entirely. When he saw hazards on the shoulder now, he reached for his phone instead of his blinker. He called in location and description and stayed in his lane. He told himself it was safer, that professional responders would do more good than one tired driver with a basic toolbox. The old code he had lived by felt like a path back to that clean engine bay and that blank phone screen. Weeks later, he passed a crash site that was undeniably real. A pickup lay on its side in the ditch, lights still on, steam lifting from the crumpled front end. Another car had already stopped. A figure waved frantically. Jordan slowed, hands tightening on the wheel, then pressed the accelerator gently and rolled past, eyes forward. He called the state patrol line. He gave mile marker and direction. He did not pull onto the shoulder. I saw a real wreck later and still did not stop. I called it in and kept rolling. That is when I knew something had changed in me for good. From the driver's later written statement, he began seeing the white pickup less often after that. When it did appear, it stayed farther back, idling at the edge of lots or pausing on overpasses as he passed beneath. Its headlights still flashed in patterns he recognized. His CB, even when powered down, still occasionally crackled with short bursts of carrier that matched the timing of his lane changes. Jordan never proved that the mark on his mirror had been a tracking device, a tag for human criminals, or something stranger tied to the pattern of 1-minute gaps and 3-count signals that Black Pine Archives had documented in other cases. What he could prove belonged to paper and logs, a transparent marker bagged and labeled, a shop work order noting an etched symbol, a telematics summary listing unexplained 1-minute location gaps, and a change in his own operational behavior that safety reported as increased caution regarding roadside assistance, but which Jordan privately summed another way. "The road did not have to block me or chase me," he wrote in his final statement. "It just had to touch my truck once and then sound helpful on the radio until I started living like I was being watched." Archival transition. A clear mark on a mirror acted like permission, and a white pickup appeared like confirmation. The final file in this series returned to the core mechanism behind all of them, a voice on the CB that sounded exactly like the driver, delayed by 1 minute, growing more predictive the longer it was allowed to listen. Logan Price had driven long enough to stop trusting the clock on the wall and start trusting the clock in his own head. He measured nights and exits, way stations, familiar overpasses, and the small rituals that told him he was still alert. One of those rituals was talking to himself in short, clipped phrases, just enough sound to keep his thoughts from drifting too far into the empty dark. He ran a regular night lane through a chain of small towns, stitched together by 2-lane highway and short interstate segments. The route was efficient, the pay predictable, the scenery forgettable. That was what he liked about it. No mountain passes, no extreme weather, no long stretches without fuel. Just a corridor of gas stations, low sodium lights, and the occasional 24-hour diner. On a fog-heavy night in late autumn, the corridor felt narrower than usual. The fog did not sit in low banks. It hung thick at windshield height, swallowing his high beams and turning the trees into damp walls. The highway should have felt familiar. Instead, Logan felt like he was driving inside a tunnel made of wet air and reflected light. His CB was on low volume, more out of habit than need. The channel carried the occasional burst of static and the distant echo of other drivers passing through different weather. Logan had no intention of transmitting. He was tired enough to want quiet. At some point between 2 small towns whose names he barely registered, he muttered a short sentence to himself. A reminder about the next fuel stop. A note about checking straps at the next break. It came out as a half-whisper, barely louder than his own breathing. 1 minute later, the same sentence came from his CB speaker, in his own voice. I heard my own words replayed 1 minute later, with a layer of static like an old recording. From the driver's audio journal, Logan froze with one hand on the wheel and the other on the shifter. His first thought was a stuck mic. He glanced at the radio. The transmit indicator was dark. The mic sat in its cradle, cord relaxed. He reached out and touched the switch anyway, more for the feeling of doing something than for effect. The speaker crackled again. Silence. No call sign, no break request, no local joke. Just the faint hiss of carrier, then nothing. Logan told himself he had misheard. The fog pressed closer. The road narrowed under his headlights. He rolled his shoulders to loosen them and tried another test. He tapped the steering wheel 3 times with his index finger. 60 slow heartbeats later, the CB speaker clicked and returned 3 taps. Not muted thumps. Clean metallic strikes as if someone had recorded his gesture and played it back through a different surface. It gave me my own tapping back, like the truck had echoed me from somewhere else. From the driver's written statement, he changed channels. The display flicked from one number to another. The static shifted tone. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then his own voice came through again, slightly flattened by transmission, repeating the earlier fuel reminder word for word. He tried a different test. He whispered a sentence about the fog, changing it midway. He stumbled over a word, corrected himself, and finished. 1 minute later, the radio responded with his own sentence, but it cleaned up his mistake. It dropped the stumble, corrected the word, and delivered the line with a confidence he had not used. It repeated me, but it corrected me, like it preferred a specific version of what I meant to say. From the driver's dash recorder notes, other systems began to misbehave in small, aligned ways. His navigation map jittered, then went blank for a stretch of highway that should have been fully mapped. The blue position marker disappeared entirely, replaced by a gray field and a no data bar that persisted for 1 minute before snapping back with his rig further ahead than it had any right to be. His dash clock repeated a minute. He watched it tick to a specific time, then watched the same digits surface again, as if time had doubled back on itself. His ELD, when he exported the data later, showed a 1-minute gap in location pings that lined up exactly with the first replays. 1-minute location gap matched the first time my own voice came back through the radio. From the compliance note, the fog thickened until the shoulders vanished. The trees lining the highway became impressions rather than objects. Light from his own marker lamps bounced back at him in a way that made depth hard to judge. In that hazy tunnel, reflective points appeared at irregular intervals between the trunks, not full headlamps. Small flashes like tacks on trees, like eyes at odd heights, like bits of glass pressed into bark. Logan refused to focus on them for long. Staring at roadside shapes was how dead animals and guardrails turned into threats in tired vision. He kept his gaze central on the dividing line when he could see it, and the vague, bright smear where the road should be when he could not. The voice on the CB softened, losing some of its static edge. It took on the cadence of dispatch, a neutral, practiced tone used to issue instructions without drama. It said his name once in his own voice. Then it recommended the next exit, 3 miles ahead. It described a safe place to rest. It mentioned fatigue as a risk, using phrasing he might have used himself in a safety meeting. It spoke like a service designed to keep him alive. Logan did not answer. He kept the wheel straight and passed the exit. 1 minute later, the radio clicked and played his own voice, agreeing to take the exit he had just refused. That was my voice saying I would exit, with words I never spoke and a calm I did not feel. From the driver's audio journal, his hands tightened on the wheel until the tendons ached. He told himself to stop feeding it material. He clamped his jaw shut. He stopped muttering. He let the cab settle into mechanical sounds. The hum of tires, the soft whistle of air through imperfect seals, the occasional rattle from somewhere in the sleeper. 1 minute later, the radio played his breathing back to him. Not loud. Close. A low, intimate sound that matched the rhythm in his own chest, layered beneath a faint hiss. Then, under that, 3 knocks like fingertips on plastic, as if something on the other end of the circuit had reached out and tapped the mic casing. He cut the power to the unit entirely. The display went dark. The speaker fell silent. For a few miles, all he heard was the road and the anxious shift of his own thoughts. His phone, sitting in its cradle, lit up without touch. The voice memo app opened. A blank recording started, waveform shifting with the sound of the cab. Logan watched in the corner of his eye as the line moved with each breath. He reached out and closed the app. The phone screen went dark again. When he checked later, the file was there. Its timestamp was exactly 1 minute ahead of when he remembered seeing it begin. The memo file started 1 minute before I saw it recording. The device log and my memory did not agree. From the driver's personal notes, at some point the fog began to thin. Night lightened to a flat pre-dawn gray. The reflective points in the trees faded. Exit signs reappeared with their normal green glow and ordinary numbering. The highway widened. Other vehicles showed up in his mirrors, their presence almost jarring after so many miles alone. Logan reached the distribution center on the edge of a small city just after sunrise. He followed the usual process. Gate check, dock assignment, slow backing into place. When he set his brakes, he did not move to open the door. He sat with his hands in his lap and listened. For 1 full minute, the cab was quiet. Then his powered-down CB speaker clicked once. The unit screen remained dark, but the sound came through clean. His own voice spoke a final sentence, low and close, with the subtle resonance of someone talking inside the confined space of the cab. The words were simple and directed, addressed to nobody human. It sounded like something sitting in the passenger seat, using my mouth and my lungs. From the final voice memo, Logan left the ignition off, took his keys with him, and walked into the building. He reported fatigue to the shift supervisor. He requested to be taken off the schedule for at least one night. He framed it in practical terms. Too many hours, not enough rest, fog stress. They were reasons dispatch and safety could accept. Fleet telematics later showed that his truck's key fob had been used to unlock the cab door 1 minute after he entered the building. Key event logged at 1 minute past driver entry time, with no recorded camera footage of access. From the fleet telematics summary, when Logan returned to the lot an hour later, his cab door was closed but not latched. Nothing appeared stolen. His bedding was undisturbed. The only detail that made his stomach drop was small and easily overlooked. The CB microphone was warm to the touch, not hot from sun. Warm like an object that had been held in a human hand and then set down recently. The plastic casing gave off a faint residual heat that did not match the morning air. Logan unplugged the radio entirely. He removed it from its bracket, coiled the cord, and set the unit on the passenger seat. He did not power it on again. When his next truck assignment came through, he refused the installation of a CB. He cited personal preference and distraction risk on his request form. He still talked to himself sometimes out of habit, but he did it outside the cab, in warehouses, in break rooms, on walks around the yard while he checked tires. Inside the truck, he kept his mouth shut because he had arrived at a conclusion that did not fit into any standard incident category. The road did not need to build a fake way station for everyone. It did not need to knock on every cab door or tag every mirror. Those were probes, tests, different expressions of the same thing. What it seemed to need most in cases like his was a voice. Once it had enough of your speech patterns, your timing, your small, exhausted phrases, it could begin to speak as you. It could agree to turns you had refused, confirm exits you had skipped, and accept instructions you had never heard. It could begin to move you 1 minute ahead of yourself into choices you did not remember making. Final archival note: 9 case files, different drivers, different carriers, different stretches of small-town highway and unremarkable interstates. 1 repeating structure, 1-minute gaps across devices, 3 and 3 signals expressed through lights, knocks and marks, enforcement that wore no name, sealed spaces that behaved like doors, and broadcasts that carried knowledge without sight. If one of these files stayed with you, write which one and why. And if you have ever heard your own voice come back through your radio when you were not transmitting, share your experience in the comments. Subscribe to Black Pine Archives and keep your eyes on the shoulder. Some signals do not want an answer, they want an opening.